Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Spaniard Show. Whether you're listening on the podcast app or whether you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate you being here. This is Talks number 428, some thoughts on death. And I certainly have some structure to this episode. I don't have any notes in front of me yet, so I'm kind of going off the thoughts that I've formulated in my head. But thinking about what to talk about today, the idea of death. While it's not a fun topic to talk about, it's not something that people like to mention or think about. It is an inevitable part of life. And in the last few years, it's been a part of my family's life and been very difficult. But at the same time, there's kind of a lesson to be learned, or as silver of a lining as you can possibly get from death. I'll start back a couple years to give you a little bit of a backstory. For those of you who listen to the show, you already know this or will have heard me talk about this. So I'll kind of expedite the process to get into the most recent times. But a few years ago, the fall before COVID, so fall of 2019, my oldest brother was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. Glioblastoma is the type of cancer. Since that time, he's had 3 surgeries. I talk about it in my assembly programs and speaking events. I've also talked about it here on the show, like I said, off and on a good bit. Thankfully, he is alive and as well as he can possibly be. At that same time, fall of 2019, my mom, eventually we came to know that she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease out of nowhere. Happened concurrently with my brother going through all this stuff, to the point where my mom was in the ICU for 3 weeks and fully ventilated, feeding tube. We thought we were saying goodbye. Same time, boom, boom, boom. Since that time, my and I'm going, like I said, off the top of my head, so I believe I'm including everything. My grandmother, who was 93 years old, she recently passed away, probably, well, right before Christmas, she passed away. My grandfather, who is 94, her husband, is not doing well. And my aunt, my mom's sister, recently passed away. So those are the major ones that jump out at me in terms of the last several years. And I never really thought much about it. Or would you just kind of live? And I'm sure you can resonate with that in your own life. You're going through stuff and you're just like fighting the fight every day. And I hadn't taken a step back to look at it. And then recently my wife said, man, you guys are going through a lot. Where I started thinking about it and thought, yeah, it is going through a lot. And add to that, if you're my age-ish, like life just hits you. Stuff could be your kids, could be neighbors, could be your job, could be whatever. So there's all those other little things, but then these giant things that have hit our family as well. And it was really interesting. I went to 2 funerals in the last month, and that of my grandmother, who was 93, and that of my aunt, who was 72, I believe, 72, 73, right around that age. It was interesting and weird to me, my feelings, how I reacted, not my feelings, but rather how I reacted at both the funerals. And obviously these are 2 of the most important people in my life, my grandmother, my dad's mom, and my aunt, my mom's sister. And my reaction, I didn't know how I was going to react. I went into this thinking, okay, I think back to when my brother and my mom got sick, and I released an episode around that time, and I was just blubbering, crying. I mean, just like a little baby. I was just emotionally outpouring on the episode. And so I thought, as I was getting ready to go to my grandma's funeral, I thought, okay, like I'm prepped. I'm a little bit, I don't want to say hardened in a bad way, but I'm like, I'm all right for this. And I went there and I wasn't super emotional. I went and all the pictures, first thing when you see the pictures is see a breakdown. And I kind of got it together. And then I started thinking a little bit beforehand, but also there, I started thinking, man, she did it. Like she did it. She is 93, just about to be, no, she was 93, going to be 94. Her and my pap are like a year apart. Is either 93 and 94 or 94 and 95. Off the top of my head, I'm messing up here. But super long life, super active life, right till the end. And so mixed in with that sadness was this feeling of kind of inspiration. Yeah, that's how I want to do it. Her and my grandfather were married for over 75 years. It's fascinating. When you think of life and what you hope for, they did it. And my pap is still doing it, albeit he's not in the best situation, but they did it. And it was a small funeral, and it was an intimate funeral, and really just I left feeling good, like feeling like she did it. Thanks, Nam. Like a sort of guidance type thing. So then a couple weeks later, my aunt passed away. And my aunt is my mom's sister. And we grew up kind of the way we grew up. My mom has two sisters. My mom's mom and dad, so my grandparents, my nanny died when I was a kid. I was 10 or 11. And then my grandfather died, I'm going to say 10-ish years ago. And we have, it's just, I grew up in this family. There we are Italian. My grandparents are first generation American, super ethnic and cultural upbringing in that environment. Much of my childhood is in that environment, spaghetti dinners and all that stuff, Christmases and smooching and kissing and hugs and just that environment. And my mom's sister, Roro, recently passed away. And we kind of knew it was coming. And so we just kind of knew it was coming. At the funeral, again, I'm where I live, driving a couple hours there. In prep, I'm thinking, all right, I think I'm going to be all right. I think I'm going to be okay. In my head thinking, all right, we've had these like close calls with death with my brother and my mom. We've had, my grandmother dying, my grandfather not in a great state, other stuff going on that's not necessarily life, death, but other stuff. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to be all right. I'm like, feeling stoic, feeling a little bit hardened, but not in a, like screw the world way, but just like, oh, okay, I'm ready for this. So we go to the funeral. Honest to goodness, I don't ever remember in my life reacting. So it wasn't hyperventilating. I was not hyperventilating. But standing at the casket, I got so hot, so quick, so hot, so quick. And I was like breathing. If you're watching the video on YouTube, and I'm trying not to literally just break down. I'm trying not to just emotionally bawl. I like cry. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I almost have zero control over myself. It wasn't zero control, but it was like, I will remember that moment forever. And I think for me, it was because I thought a couple things. Immediately, like that funeral home, that neighborhood, it's where we went to church. It's like all this like family history brought me back to childhood, brought me back to being a boy. I think about my son. He's a boy and he's a kid. And I thought of me at that age and like, well, she was in my life and my mom's in my life. And I just started thinking of him and his aunt, my sister, like, oh, it was this weird passage of time and memories that all collided. And so I'm thinking of me as his age with my aunts, and now I'm his dad, and now my aunt passed away. And it's like this weird, like I said, passage of time, reality of life, circle of life type thing. I also thought to myself, well, this is my mom's sister. I'm going to have to go through this with my mom, and I'm going to have to go through this with my other aunt, who's my godmother. And it's just like all that stuff just hit me out of nowhere, and just, it was very hard, very, very hard to not just totally lose it. And then it was the neat part of it. And I'll get to the lessons. It's not all doom and gloom, but the neat part of it is post, the viewing, we had a little service at the funeral home, and we all got to talk and share stories. And my Aunt Roro was such a unique person, such a special person, such a just dynamic person. And so we all shared stories, and it was so much like Dred texted me and we were talking about it. And Dred is my partner and business partner and friend and mentor, if you're new. But he said, like, it was one of the most, I'll try to get it exactly, but he said, was one of the most striking funerals I've ever attended. So much speaking about the person lost with such unique things to say. So it was an awesome kind of celebration after the viewing. And I want to tell two quick stories. So two funny stories about my aunt and about my memories that I shared. So I used to pee the bed, and I used to pee the bed until I was like 12 years old. I peed the bed a lot, and it was something I was embarrassed of, and it was very difficult to deal with, but whatever, it is what it is. And we used to have these big sleepovers. There were 9 grandkids total, and we used to have these sleepovers, and my aunt used to get so mad at me because she would say, like, there would be the smallest little hole in that plastic, and you would find it and you would pee through it. So I would pee on the carpet all the time. So that was one of the funny memories. And then another funny memory is I used to run away, quote, air quotes, run away as a kid. And I literally would pack I would get like a paper bag from the grocery store, and I don't know, just throw socks in it, whatever laundry was sitting there, and like storm off and tell my mom I was so upset, and I'd run away. And my aunt lived like 100 yards from us, and I would go up to her house and I'd say, like, don't tell my mom I'm here. Please don't tell my mom I'm here. And then I would just like sit up there, and in my brain as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, again, my son is 6, my daughter's 9. And in my brain back then, I'm thinking to myself, man, my mom has no idea. Whereas really, my aunt probably walked to the other room and called my mom and said, Charlie's here. I'll bring him down in a little bit. And it's funny to think of that as a parent, how like, I think in my brain, how my wife and I will communicate without the kids having any idea. And then one of us will approach the kids without them having any idea that my wife and I already talked about it. So it was a neat, again, kind of passage of time, I don't know, perspective that those stories share, but it ended up being just a really like special sharing period. And then my siblings and I, and some of our spouses went out and got pizza. So it ended up being like a really nice time together. But the moral or the lesson to this episode, being around death, and I'm saying this with perspective. I haven't lost my mom or my dad. God forbid, I've never lost a child. There are pains that I hope to never endure in my life. And there are pains that I know I will have to endure in my life. So I'm saying this all with perspective. But starting back when my mom and my brother got sick in 2019, I remember, and I've said this before, but how whenever we would have to go stay in the hospital for a period of time or go down to Houston with my brother or, for these cancer treatments, there was like nowhere else I wanted to be. I was totally focused on that thing at that time. And what with, my phone's right here, the computer's here, probably getting emails, blah, 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 blah. It just felt so good to be focused and caring about one thing. Like I knew where I had to be, and it was right there at that moment. And so while these things are super difficult, for me, it centers me. Like it centers me. It brings me back to what is important. Oh, I didn't get that school gig because their budget was this and I was charging that and I couldn't make it work. And then you think, oh, okay, there are bigger problems. So for me, this centers me. It brings me right back to what's really important. And the hope is that can continue. Obviously, it makes you grateful for what you have. I'm not sure I love my kids more than when I returned from something like this, and thank God for them and their health and my wife's health and our family and like the sunshine and all of these different things. So as terrible as it is dealing with a loss, it's also so inspiring. And another thing that was so neat at my aunt's funeral is my nieces and nephews, so like her grandkids who are teens or early 20s, spoke. And it was just so cool to see these little kids, babies, who are now young men and women, keep their composure, first of all, which I have no idea how they did, but then talk. Like that's why I love interacting with kids during my assemblies. You hear them say things that you think, oh my gosh, who knew that was inside your brain? With my nieces and nephews, it was the same way. They're talking and you're like proud. I'm proud to be their uncle. I'm thinking, holy cow, this is awesome. They're people, they're real people with real feelings and they're talking out loud. And it's so awesome because rarely do you ever get to see that. So the thoughts on death, the centering of it, how it brings you to what's really important in life, the gratitude that it gives you for what you do have in life, and then also the inspiration that it gives you to live your best life, to honor those people. It's like one of those things. I don't want death for me. I don't want death for you. I don't want death for anyone, but it is. Like it is. And so again, I'm talking. I'm going to have to go through some really, 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 really painful things in the future. So this is all being said more than with a grain of salt, but with the perspective that I have now as I'm recording on January 25th, 2023. So those are some thoughts on death. Some of the things that have been going on in my family's life. And I hope some of those stories make you reflect, be grateful, laugh a little bit, and also be inspired. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening via your podcast app, this is The Spaniard Show. All of my links can be found at charliespaniard.com. They're below in the show notes as well, whether you're listening on the podcast app or whether you're watching on YouTube. Click all my book highlights, book summaries, conversations, social media links, speaking tabs as well. All that can be found at charliespaniard.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you.